Now, let's go through the race here. We don't really have a whole lot to go on because we've only had 2 races. And what we do have to share regarding any stats or trends. So we got Kyle winning as the defending champ. Drove a Chevy, was on the pole. 2022, it was Logano with a Ford starting 7th. So both have started in the top 10, which probably isn't a surprise because this is so far this has been a boring track. Doesn't seem to be a lot of passing, so I would think you'd want to start up front. And then the one manufacturer that sticks out the most for me is Ford, because if you look at it, there was a little inconsistency between Chevy the first year, major improvement year 2. Toyota, they've just been okay. But Ford, last year, 6 of the top 13, and they led a combined 83 laps. That was second best. In 2022, they had 3 of the top 5, including the winner, and led the second most by just 3 laps at 117 combined laps. So they have been the most consistent here so far. And by the way, it's just a month ago, everybody wondering about Ford again. And every time they wonder about Ford, all of a sudden they've won 2 of the last 4 races, and it's Chevy. After another great start, they always get up these great starts. They have not won in the last 4 races and has just 1 win in the last 7.
Yeah, and you mentioned about the starting position. Yeah, this track is difficult to pass at. It's got 2 different radius corners. It's not the greatest, steepest banking that gives drivers tons of room. You might have multiple grooves at the wider end of the track, but not necessarily at the more narrow end. And yeah, we don't have a lot of history. Both Cup races were won by somebody that started inside the top 10. But if you look at the Truck Series, that they've done 23 races at this track, and only 2 drivers have ever won starting outside of the top 10.
Oh.
So again, you really want to be starting inside the top 10 if you're setting up your fantasy roster, if you're looking at picks. Obviously go forth and with the values that you see that we talk about here today, get those early if they're further on down the value chain. But after qualifying, those guys in the top 10 are going to be, significantly more expensive than they are today. And Hamlin and Larson, as we're looking at here on the screen, they're probably not going to change much, so you can wait on them, see how they practice and qualify. But qualifying is going to be very important here, as is track position throughout the afternoon.
Yeah, I was just taking a look at those. Matter of fact, let me pop it up here so everybody can see. I was taking a look at those finishes. Well, here's the Cup. Now here, even in the Xfinity, if you go right here, look at that. Keselowski broke the string. Well, they haven't raced here since 2010, but still, even when they were racing here, because he was the last one to race here. Otherwise, look at that. Was that 12 all in the top 10?
Exactly right.
And then there's the Truck Series, and then you can see all the top 10s, except this one here, basically. So yeah. All right, now let's get back to. And you thought that? Well, actually, I was taking a look at some of this from our track notes. So, New Hampshire and Darlington would be considered the most similar. New Hampshire, more because they have longer straights, and Darlington, sort of similar to the different sized corners. So, no New Hampshire though this year. I wouldn't worry about last year, but you can if you want to. Darlington would be the one racetrack to look at then.
Yeah, and
just
even
a little
that's
bit.
not highly comparable. It's more like New Hampshire because the banking just isn't there. The surface is a little bit newer, so it's tough to find a comparison. But a track position track that's a faster one, New Hampshire would be it. So yeah, Darlington, but at a discount.
Okay, so here are the top drivers, and Denny Hamlin. We should say something. He's the favorite, not Kyle Larson. And maybe it's because also Denny Hamlin is the leader right now in points. It's Denny Hamlin. So, as well he should be. He is definitely been the best driver this year so far. He comes in here with 4 straight top 5s and a win. He's got 3 wins on the season. And by the way, this is a shorter type track. Not a short track, but a shorter type track. A little over a mile. He's already won on 1 mile and 2 short tracks this year. 4th at Darlington, too, for what that's worth. 2nd in this race last year. Had an incident in the first year, so can't say what he would have done there. But again, you are talking about 5-1. Then you got Larson, Byron, and Blaney in this. Let's just talk about these 4 here. Larson, yeah, I don't really see anything spectacular here. So you always look for excuses not to take some of these favorites. So I can kind of look at it this week and go, maybe I don't really need to take Kyle Larson this week. William Byron, he's been okay here, nothing great. Same thing maybe. Blaney, the main reason, sort of like we were talking about Christopher Bell last week, that's the only reason to not go with Ryan Blaney, because he's just in a little bit of a rut now, as he often gets, and a lot of drivers do. But he's been really good here in both runs, so keep that in mind.
Yeah, I think Denny Hamlin definitely deserves to be the favorite. I think he would have done significantly better in 2022. If you remember, that was one of the incidents that year of him with Ross Chastain. He kind of threw that race away, trying to ruin Chastain's race.
Okay.
So discount his 34th place finish. That said, he hasn't led any laps here, though he was the runner-up at the race last year, though obviously a worthy favorite here coming into this weekend. As far as Kyle Larson goes, if he qualified better, I think he'd probably be, a better selection. You can definitely wait to see how he qualifies this weekend. His two starts were 15th and 22nd. His best finish was 4th. Again, if he qualifies inside the top 10, why wouldn't he, be a contender for the win? I think he absolutely would be. Just qualifying the first two races here haven't been his strong suit. So at those odds, you can wait. They're not going to come down, a whole heck of a lot if he qualifies inside the top 10. They will come down a little, but not a ton. So you can wait to see how he qualifies. Then out of the two, William Byron and Ryan Blaney. Again, Byron, nothing huge. He did lead 30 laps in the race last year, finished inside the top 10. He's kind of faded a little bit in recent weeks, so that's probably my bigger concern in going with Byron.
Okay.
Like you said with Blaney, he is in a bit of a slump, but this has been a Ford track. So if there's a place where Blaney can turn a slump around, I don't see why it couldn't come this weekend. So obviously wait to see where he qualifies, at a plus 850 or whatever. Not going to get too much lower, maybe a 6 or 5 if he qualifies on the front row or something like that. So you have a little bit of room to wait. But out of this bunch, certainly Hamlin would be the favorite. Probably my second guess would be, or my second pick, and this would be more of a gut feel versus anything concrete, would be Blaney.
Well, yeah, and because we don't know when he's going to get out of it. But yeah, why not it be this week, especially if he does qualify, because that's also been what has been the problem the last few weeks. You can see it after qualifying and practice. So if he qualifies and practices well, that might be your first sign that maybe this is the week to take him. So,
agreed.
Okay, Truex is also 8-1, and let's go with these four: Truex, Bell, Reddick, and Gibbs. And Truex also 8-1, Bell winning back-to-back, unlikely, Reddick 12, Gibbs 12. So Truex, he's the one that really sticks out for me. I like the fact that we're getting 8-1 odds. We know he's overdue for a win. He was much faster last week in practice and qualifying, which is just what we said with Blaney. That was a good sign. Who knows what happens if they got the extra 200 miles on Sunday. And he's 5th and 6th here, so those are two good finishes. Also, I was just doing a little bit, and again, I said, not have to take too much into it because it was last year, but still, I did look at last year's New Hampshire race, and that was won by Martin Truex Jr.
Yeah, Truex, I would say he's one that you probably go with now. He's likely going to qualify well. He started 13th and 5th in the two races here. The race that he started 13th actually in 2022, he led 42 laps and he finished 5th and 6th in both of those races. So two top 10s back to back. Knows this track, like you said, very successful at New Hampshire. He's been good at the 1 mile tracks in general. And Joe Gibbs Racing, Truex just needs a little bit of luck on his side, and he's going to make it to victory lane. He could easily challenge teammate Denny Hamlin. So I think certainly Truex is the better value here. Christopher Bell, like you said, 9th and 11th in his two finishes or two starts here, going back-to-back weeks, especially considering his inconsistency and his ups and downs. More recently, I wouldn't expect him to go back-to-back with wins, so he's probably somebody that I would discount, and I would end up going with Truex in this instance.
Yeah, Reddick, now the odds are better now at 12-1. We understand why they're better, but that does intrigue me about Reddick because he was in that wreck last year, so I don't know. And look, he doesn't have any good results here so far, but he did lead 174 laps at Darlington, and he was 6th at New Hampshire last year, if you want to take that into consideration. But Obviously, I wouldn't even think of him at 8-1, but at 12-1 now, I'm a little bit curious with Reddick.
Yeah, for me, he'd have to be one where you think that this week he's gonna do something special, and you'd have to take him now because he tends to
Yes.
qualify well. He's qualified inside the top 10 both times here. He just hasn't finished inside the top 10. He crashed out last year, finished 35th. The year before that, he started fourth and finished 16th. So it's about finishing the race. And so far this season, finishing the race in a strong position has kind of been his weak point. So unless you think that, something unique out of him this weekend is just going to turn that kind of trend or that trajectory around, you got to take him now. Definitely don't wait. But he's not one that would rise to the top of my list just based on the fact that 2 races here he's failed to finish in the top 10 both times, despite starting inside the top 10.
Yeah, great point. Absolutely. So if you're going to take him, without question, take him now. Next group, we've got some Fords, Keselowski, Logano. We also have Kyle Busch, Elliott. So Keselowski, though, look, I know the results weren't good here last year, and really, if you take a look at it, Buescher, both of them really haven't done anything here. So that's one thing, and the odds are now down to 12-1 instead of 18-1, which is okay. All of that saying, he's a Ford. He won Darlington for whatever that's worth, and he's just really hot right now. And because of that, I think he has to be a take this week at 12-1.
Yeah, I would agree just based on his current trajectory. The only thing, like you said, is just at this track, he's not done anything. His best starting position was 19th. His best finishing position was 20th. Clearly racing better now and has better equipment now than he's had in either of those years. So this, without question, should be his best finish in this series at this track this weekend. It should be here. He should be running within the top 5, considering where he's been each week up until then. I think if Keselowski's a must take, I think Logano is actually a must take as well, because again, a Ford, we've talked about him, being able to get something going, and he just needs that little bit of luck, a little bit of good fortune to come his direction. He's started inside the top 10 both times.
Oh, yeah.
Finished inside the top 5 both times, won it in 2022, third last year. I think if we don't see something great out of Logano this week, it's going to be a little while before I think the team's going to turn it around. So I think you got to take Logano and Keselowski right now.
Yes, matter of fact, also keep this in mind that Logano was second last year at New Hampshire. Keselowski was 5th last year at New Hampshire. So these are all good signs with the odds that say, yes, take the 2 Fords there, Keselowski and Logano at 12 and 14-1. And who knows, maybe this is the race that gets Logano going. It's possible. What about, we didn't really mention Busch and Elliott. Elliott, I think, even though you're getting good number here at 16, there's a reason for that. Look, he didn't race last year, didn't do much the first year, but still it is 16-1, understanding that Chevy is going through a little bit of a drought, as we mentioned. And then Kyle Busch, well, speaking of droughts, Kyle is still kind of in that kind of bad zone, but he is the defending champ. He led about 50% of the laps last year. He finished second the year before that, leading a good number of laps. So I just can't. I mean, how do you not take Kyle at 15-1, considering how good he's been here?
Without question, you have to take Kyle Busch this week. Yeah, we've only had 2 races here, but he has been by far the best driver. 187 laps led across the 2 races. Started 12th, finished runner-up in 2022. Started first and finished first last year. I don't care what kind of streak he's on. This is a track that Kyle Busch just gets, and he's been better than anybody else, regardless of what car he's been in. That was, 2022 was in the Joe Gibbs. 2023 was in Childress. So certainly a different situation maybe this year than he was in last year, but still, this is a great track for Kyle Busch, and those odds right now are exceptional.
All right, now let's move on to the next group of 4. And we've got Buescher, Chastain, Wallace, and Bowman. Now, Buescher, I'm willing to pass this week. If you really look at it, he's kind of been struggling. And it's not because he hasn't had a couple of good shots, and it's really because it's just bad luck right now for the most part, or at least half the part. It's just been luck. We saw what happened last week with not being able to qualify, and otherwise he was right there. I mean, who knows what could have happened all day on Sunday if he would have not crashed on Saturday. But yeah, I mean, the good thing is he's 18-1 and he's driving a Ford. But still, yeah, there's just something about it. 12th last year. And then Chastain, that's a big number at 20. You always, and I guess there's always going to be a driver or two because of the competitiveness in this series that you're going to get good odds with, and it just happens to be Ross Chastain at this point. I'm not sure I see anything though at this yet, but he is such a high number that I'm willing to wait at qualifying to see, because even if he qualifies and practices well, you should still get a good number. But if you're looking for a long shot, it's not the worst idea. And then you got Bubba and Bowman at 40-1. I don't see much in Bubba based on the stats, and I don't really see a whole lot in Bowman either, except that he's really off to a good start, as we talked about.
Yeah, I agree. Out of this group, you want to go with Chastain, and I think you can also wait because if you're getting 40-1, or I'm sorry, 20-1 right now for Chastain, if you look at his starting position, he's always started inside the top 10. So 10th and 8th were his starting positions. So he typically qualifies well. So you're getting a discount on him right out of the gate. If he does qualify well, I think you're right that those odds aren't going to come down drastically. He did finish 8th the first year. And then 22nd in 2023. And remember, he was going back and forth with Hamlin at that time as well. Hamlin was trying to hold him up, so he probably could have done even better than that 8th place finish that he had in 2022. But, of this group, certainly Chastain would be the one that is most intriguing. But I agree with you. I think you've got room to wait until you see what practice and qualifying does. If he qualifies outside the top 10, stay away from him without question. If he goes inside the top 10, you feel, and his numbers don't change a ton, that's pretty decent value.
By the way, just keep in mind too, and I know we've already talked about Truex, but I was just looking over some other information, and when he won New Hampshire's race last year, he led 254 of the 301 laps. So it wasn't just a win; it was a dominating performance. So, all right. As far as the rest of the long shots, there you see them: Gregson, Berry, Briscoe at 60. And then you get the big numbers. I mean, how embarrassing it must be for Austin Dillon to be 250-1. And look at this, by the way. Ricky Stenhouse is 1,000-1. I don't know about. I mean, Cindric to me is a little bit interesting, only because he's raced well here. I don't think any of these guys are going to win. Okay, but if you like to bet long shots, Cindric has actually performed well here, and he's driving a Ford. So I would definitely say put a buck on him. Josh Berry might be interesting too. He's driving a Ford, and he is coming off his best back-to-back Cup results of the season. He was also third at Darlington, for what that's worth. So as far as the long shots, I would probably go Berry, Cindric, maybe Briscoe, because he's also driving a Ford. I'd keep an eye on him, and he's had a much better year so far this year, as we know. And Noah Gregson's also driving a Ford at 60-1, and we also have seen him do pretty decent things so far this season. So those would be some of the ones that I would look at if, and I don't know, maybe even McDowell, because he's driving a Ford and he's 250-1, and he's been doing a really good job of qualifying every week.
McDowell's actually stepped up his game from earlier in the season, so he's started to find some traction, start moving things in the right direction. He's not going to be with that team next year, so his turnaround in form kind of coincided with that announcement that he'd be leaving at the end of the year, so that's kind of interesting. But yeah, Austin Cindric, if you're putting together a fantasy roster and you're looking down at the lower end of the price scale, trying to fill out those bottom end slots, I think Austin Cindric is definitely one that you've got to consider. 11th and 13th in his two finishes here, and he started inside the top 10 both of those times. Again, I probably wouldn't wager on him unless I really like going for long shots. I don't necessarily think that he's going to win. But then also, like you said, any of the Stewart-Haas cars I think could be good. Barry, Gregson crashed out last week, unfortunately, after colliding with Stenhouse. And then also Briscoe's been racing pretty well. It's going to be interesting to see how any of those drivers do with Stuart Haas's announcement that they're closing up shop at the end of this year. So maybe that coincides and goes along the McDowell path, where McDowell said he was leaving the team and then found a turnaround in form. Maybe Stuart Haas Racing now announcing that they're not going to be back next year. Maybe that starts to turn up the wick a little bit and they start really pushing a little bit extra, trying to get that success. So it'll be interesting to see. I think out of that bunch, I probably wouldn't go with Cindric. I definitely would take Cindric from a fantasy standpoint, but I'd probably look more at Gregson, maybe even more so Briscoe, just because I think both of those drivers have been racing pretty well and getting some pretty decent finishes and moving forward. And then obviously Josh Berry coming off a pretty good string of results would be a good one as well. Those would be my long shot.
Yeah, and maybe there'll be some karma this week for the Stewart Haas drivers. You never know.
Mm-hmm.
So Briscoe, Berry, and Gregson. I don't know. Maybe you go ahead and throw a buck on each of them just in case something dramatic happens. But yeah, that's just a crazy story. We'll see what the overall fallout is, but it's going to take a while. This, though, I will say, it's just another reason why this whole silly season. Free agency during the season stuff. I mean, you don't hear like if it's sort of like saying like a football team halfway through the season, the general manager says, "Well, the whole front office is not going to be back next year, just so you know. Coaches ain't going to be back. I don't even know if the players are going to be here. So go ahead, go have fun the rest of the season." I mean, it's just silly. That's why it's silly season. But maybe you shouldn't call it silly season. Maybe they call it ridiculous season because they should just get away with it. I know it's not going to happen anytime soon, but maybe by time your kids. How many kids you have?
Just one.
Just one. Maybe to have by time your kid's older, he'll be lucky enough to go. Really, they did that stuff? That sounds weird. Yeah, it was weird. It was kind of dumb, wasn't it? But
Can you imagine baseball or football, any of the teams in Major League or NFL, halfway through the season, just saying, oh, yeah, we're gonna go out of business at the end of the season. It's our last one.
Yeah.
What?
I know, right? Not sure about I'm not sure where you're gonna live, what your paycheck's gonna look like. Yeah.
We'll try to help you find a job, but right now nothing's guaranteed. So just you said, go out and have fun for the rest of the year.
It's crazy. It just is. And that's NASCAR. Okay, so let's go ahead and get into picks. So I'm looking at Truex, Keselowski, and Kyle Busch. I don't think we're going to have too much of a different take here.
No, we're not going to have any kind of different. Truex and Kyle Busch are my two biggest picks for sure. If you want a true long shot, maybe I'll go with Briscoe for the karma for Stuart Haas.
Okay. And by the way, looking at Logano and Kyle Busch, they're kind of almost long shots in a way. I mean, they're not when you compare them to the 60 to 1s of the world and even the 40 to 1s, but they're kind of little I mean, they're definitely big enough where you have to take them, as we said, and have to be considered really the top sleepers, if you want to put it that way.